If you would have asked me when I was in high school, what's your adult life going to be like? I would have probably said disappointing. I even had a little mantra that I always say: life is a series of downfalls and disappointments. When I was in high school, that's how I answered everything. Basically, I grew up afraid, and which was okay when I was younger. But once I was in high school, the most influential person in the room basically dictated. I mean, they didn't know that, but they basically dictated what I would do. I mean, I think everybody thought I was nice, but effectively I was a user. Emotionally I used people, relationships I used, women I used, just the whole thing. Just very, very selfish. Once a group of us went down on a 4-hour trip to New Orleans when I was in the Army. And a sergeant who we really didn't know accompanied us. He was 40. And while we were there, he got beat up pretty badly. And on the way back, we, as 20-somethings, were trying to craft lies for him to tell his wife. And I remember then and afterwards thinking to myself how pathetic that is, that this man at 40 years old is taking counsel from these 20-year-olds. And then all of a sudden, I saw myself in him. The only difference between he and I was time. A man named Charles Smith, who was becoming my mentor, was really reaching out to me simply for the sake of Christ, not to get me in his church or to have another number, but really because he loved me. And I had these two very distinct visions of where my life could go, and I realized I had to choose. I had to make a choice. So I joined the Adventures in Missions program and ended up going to Ecuador and spent some time there. And then after I came back, I had some desires professionally. But the truth is, I had a lot of healing to do. I was still very afraid. One day, Terry Rush called me from Memorial Drive Church of Christ in Tulsa and said, we'd like you to come send in a resume to be our youth minister, which to me was ludicrous because of where I knew I was coming from. And about 6 months later, and I was the most surprised of anybody, I was hired as their youth minister. Well, coming to Memorial and being surrounded by people of that same mentality, like Charles Smith had, that mentality of we're loving God, and it's not about promoting our ideals as a church. It's about loving God and loving others and just trying to be like Jesus. And that had a really profound impact on me. So in some ways, and this is odd, but I had been in ministry for 10 years, but it wasn't until just a few years ago that I really gave my life to Christ, that I wasn't doing it simply because I was afraid. It wasn't just, I don't want to go to hell, and so I better be baptized because that's what everybody says. But it was like, I really want to have a relationship with God that is not controlled by fear. The turning point for me was on a particular Sunday where I had been wrestling with this for a while, this idea of staying with fear or really making a commitment to God. And just the course of that day, and hearing a class that talked about pride, and then listening to the preacher kind of talking about baptism in a different way, as not a rule keeping, but really responding to God, I came to that point where I just needed to say, I don't care what anybody else would think. And I really want to do this in a public way to demonstrate to myself and to God, I am not being driven by fear. I'm responding to God. I am so shocked that my life is like it is now because, ultimately, I don't believe I've just got a narrowing field of options or everything is just to be feared. I really, truly believe that not only does God love me, but He's at work in me. And He's at work in all the things that I'm at work in. And so whether it's struggles with my marriage or how do you parent or issues at work, I am able to come in to those things and face them. And not that they're all of a sudden they're easy, but I have such tremendous confidence that God will do what He says He's going to do. And so that makes me a person very much at peace.